Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Lisa Cooper. She's the James F. Fries Professor of Medicine and Bloomberg Distinguished Professor in Health Equity at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. She's a board-certified general internist, social epidemiologist, and international thought leader on health disparities. She studies how race and socioeconomic factors shape patient care and how patients and health systems with communities can help at-risk populations. And let me just add on a personal note, I have found her to be a very generous scholar. So Lisa, thank you, and we look forward to your reflections.
I just wanted to start with some reflections from Dr. Williams' excellent lecture. You know, he told us some very important things, and I think one of the things we got out of this is definitely we know that there are marked racial and ethnic disparities in infections and deaths. But the main thing that I sort of took away from this is that, you know, he did say that we are in the same storm right now, but a key take-home message from this is that we are in different boats. And so therefore, people from racial and ethnic minorities are definitely facing this storm in a different way. He also reminded us that institutional and structural racism is a carefully crafted system that works exactly as it was intended to create inequities. And he talked about segregation in particular being like a toxic emission, about health inequities being manifested as biological weathering. And he talked about mistrust of patients and communities of color being a protective response, you know, so what he did leave us with was some promising ideas for how we can enhance trust in advancing health equity, talking about creating communities of opportunity, talking about building more health into healthcare. And then finally, I think we had a long conversation about how to address communication issues, key communication issues, by raising awareness of the problem of inequity, talking about how we can build the science base for increasing political will, and then enhancing empathy. We spent a lot of time on that piece. But here are some other reflections from the day. So from our voices from the healthcare system, we heard a lot about the fact that compassion and fairness and humility and transparent communication all increase trustworthiness. Adam Sharp talked about a system that delivers compassionate care equitably will be much more trustworthy and restore our hope. Andres Maldonado talking about the inability to protect frontline workers caring for underserved communities has reduced trust, and that health systems need to be more transparent about their policies and practices. Geneva Tatum talking about mistrust in medical research being high in African American communities based on the historical legacy of harm, but how some of that can be overcome by clear and authentic and respectful communication. We also heard another lesson that I took away from today was that self-awareness and familiarity can increase empathy. So, you know, a lot of people talked about becoming more aware of their own good fortune and their privilege and having access to information and education and support. And then we heard from a variety of different people about how empathy can be increased by actually walking in the shoes of those we care for and the communities that we serve. So basically really coming face to face with the same issues they face and understanding what it's really like to be who they are helps us to develop more empathy. We also heard about the importance of inviting those who come from underserved and underrepresented groups more into our conversations and our discussions, asking them and listening respectfully to them about their concerns and their wishes, respectfully without judgment. This came through in many of the conversations about relating to patients, but also in relating with community partners. Another thing we heard was that, I think one particular quote I remember specifically was that we have so many conversations with people where we don't actually hear the full story of what they're dealing with. And we miss opportunities there on personal details, really personal details, and that our crisis is actually a communication problem in that we actually don't hear as much as we think we do. So making more time for listening. Finally, I heard a lot about acting collectively. One particular individual, patient, actually wrote an essay really where she described the fact that our health system is really not a system at all, but it's a fragmented set of units that do not operate collectively. And that there's no connection between the health system and the public health system. So really sort of emphasizing the importance of us acting not only on our own, but collectively with the public health system and with other sectors of society and with all of our community partners to build trust. Fifth, I heard about eliminating false dichotomies. We hear a lot about the fact that, well, if we increase quality, we're somehow going to not be able to address equity. Or if we try to address equity, somehow we're going to miss out on like promoting safety or achieving some of our other goals. And so the reality is that we need all of these things. These are false dichotomies to say it's either one or the other. Similarly, with the economic recovery and social prosperity, we sort of dichotomize that between that and keeping people safe. And so we really need to keep in mind that all of these things work together, and that will also enhance our trustworthiness. Finally, we heard a lot about using privilege and power to dismantle unhealthy systems. There was a lot of talk about the fact that it's not only individual behaviors, but it's actually systems that need to be dismantled and recreated in a way to address these structural changes, using structural changes. So I'm going to wrap up with two articles that I think could be helpful as we think through these issues moving forward. This one is a viewpoint written by Don Wesson and Catherine Lucy and myself in JAMA last year, called Building Trust in Health Systems to Eliminate Health Disparities, in which we talked about the fact that our lack of clarity about the role and responsibility of health systems in addressing health disparities raises doubts in the communities we serve about whether we are truly committed to advancing health equity. And so in order to resolve this tension that perpetuates mistrust, there were 5 recommendations we made. First was to nurture trust-based relationships. Secondly, to establish institutional commitment through resources, to adopt co-production models with our community and multi-sector partners, to measure our progress towards agreed upon areas of focus using solid metrics, and to establish supporting systems for accountability. So really needing to sort of assist people in doing what is the right thing. And then finally, this is a viewpoint that my colleague Deidre Cruz and I just co-authored, in which we talked about how relationship-centered care and structural competency can be used to enhance health equity as a way of addressing the pandemic right now, the disparities we see in the pandemic. So we heard a lot about these issues. And so relationship-centered care is not only about the patient-physician relationship, it's basically recognizing in healthcare that all relationships are important, and that's where we actually achieve healing, is within these relationships. So we talked about, in this paper, we talked about relationship-centered care, including a focus on self-awareness, as well as knowledge, deep knowledge of our patients, research participants, colleagues, and partners, engaging in participatory communication, where people are actually asked their opinion, where we listen carefully to them and we engage them in decision-making. Showing respect for individuals, regardless of whether their perspective differs from our own. Having shared values or looking for shared points of values and shared identities. So that's the relationship-centered care piece. But then there's also the structural piece. And so what can we do to enhance our structural competency? We need to increase our awareness of health inequities and social injustices, work on building authentic community partnerships, develop more transparency in our organizational practices, whether it's around hiring, whether it's around data gathering, whatever our practice decisions are. And we need to focus on building funding for health disparities work, whether it's in the healthcare system or the research enterprise. And then finally, the importance of having diverse participation and leadership in our institutions. And all of this leads to us being more trustworthy, meaning that we actually demonstrate integrity, we demonstrate our benevolence, and we demonstrate our competency in order to enhance trust. So I just want to end by saying, this is what my community advisory board and I sent out at the beginning of this year, Healing Health, Peace, and Justice in 2020. We had no idea what we would be facing, but we are like now in the midst of the storm. And fortunately, we are gathered together to work together on this critically important issue. And so while it's a crisis, it's also an incredibly important opportunity. And this is why I have hope. And I want to thank the ABIM Foundation for bringing us together. Thank you.